Imagine armor that could stop a sword, yet weighed less than a modern bulletproof vest. Sounds impossible, right? But buried in the ruins of ancient workshops lies evidence of chainmail so advanced, it took modern metallurgists centuries to understand how it was even made. But the world of ancient armor holds far more than simple metal rings linked together. Hidden within forgotten manuscripts and archaeological digs are designs so ingenious they defied the limits of their era. Some were woven with patterns that distributed impact like modern Kevlar. Others used alloys lost to time, creating protection that warriors would kill to possess. These weren't just defensive tools. They were technological marvels steeped in mystery that shifted the balance of power across continents. One innovation turned common foot soldiers into unstoppable forces. Another was so closely guarded, empires executed anyone who tried to steal its secrets. Today, we'll uncover 5 of the most revolutionary chainmail innovations in history, each one more deadly than the last. And the first one starts with a civilization that mastered metal before Rome even existed. Innovation 1. The Celtic double ring weave. The Celts didn't just invent chainmail, they perfected a technique that made their warriors nearly invincible on the battlefield. Around 300 BCE, Celtic blacksmiths discovered something extraordinary. By alternating solid punched rings with riveted rings in a specific pattern, they created armor that could flex with the body yet resist penetration from spears and slashing swords. But here's what makes this truly remarkable. Each individual link required 17 separate hammer strikes to complete. Think about that for a moment. 17 strikes per ring, and a single shirt of Celtic mail contained anywhere from 20,000 to 40,000 rings. The genius wasn't just in the labor, it was in the mathematics. The Celts understood that a single weak link could unravel an entire section under stress. So they developed a rhythm for solid rings surrounding one riveted ring, creating a pattern that distributed force across multiple connection points simultaneously. When Roman legions first encountered Celtic warriors wearing this armor, their standard gladius, designed to pierce leather and bronze, simply glanced off. Battle reports describe Roman soldiers in shock, watching their weapons slide harmlessly across the shimmering metal shirts their enemies wore. But the Celts had something even more ingenious in their design, something that wouldn't be rediscovered for over 1,000 years. The double ring weave wasn't uniform. Celtic armor strategically varied the ring diameter across different sections of the body. Smaller, tighter rings protected the torso, where vital organs clustered. Larger, more flexible rings covered the shoulders and arms, allowing full range of motion. This wasn't random. It was biomechanical engineering before that term even existed. Archaeological evidence from burial sites revealed warriors wearing mail shirts that weighed just 15 to 20 pounds, yet could stop arrows at distances under 50 yards. The rings weren't just circular, they were slightly oval, oriented to overlap in the direction most attacks would come from. One excavated shirt from a Celtic chieftain's tomb showed another stunning detail. The rings themselves were made from different metals: iron for strength, bronze for flexibility, even traces of precious metals woven into patterns that may have held ceremonial significance. This wasn't just armor, it was a statement of technological supremacy. When Rome finally conquered Celtic territories, they didn't just take land, they took armies. The techniques were so valuable that Roman military blacksmiths spent decades trying to reverse engineer them. But the Celts had one final secret embedded in their process, a tempering technique that made their rings simultaneously harder and more flexible than anything Rome could produce. That secret died with the master smiths, but the innovation lived on, spreading east across trade routes to civilizations that would push the technology even further.
While European armies were still mastering basic ring patterns, Persian metallurgists were experimenting with something that sounds like science fiction. A metal that was simultaneously lighter and stronger than anything their enemies possessed. Around 600 CE, Persian armorers discovered titanium-rich deposits in the mountains near modern-day Afghanistan. They didn't know it was titanium. They called it sky iron because of its unusual silver-blue sheen. But what they did know was this: weapons couldn't cut it, fire couldn't weaken it, and it weighed half as much as conventional steel. The problem? Titanium has a melting point of 3,340 degrees Fahrenheit. Medieval furnaces could barely reach 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit. So the Persians developed something extraordinary. Instead of trying to forge the metal directly, they discovered that by mixing titanium ore with specific ratios of charcoal and limestone, then heating and cooling the mixture in cycles over several days, they could create small, workable ingots of a titanium iron alloy. These ingots were then drawn into wire, a process that required repeatedly heating, hammering, and drawing the metal through progressively smaller holes. A single strand of wire, thin as thread, could support the weight of an armored man. But here's where Persian innovation reached its peak. They adapted the Celtic 4-in-1 pattern, where each ring connects to 4 others, but reduced the ring diameter to just 3 millimeters. The result was chainmail that looked almost like metallic fabric. It draped like cloth, it moved like silk, yet it could stop a Persian shamshir sword in mid-swing. Contemporary accounts from Byzantine soldiers described facing Persian cataphracts, heavily armored cavalry whose armor shimmered like water, yet rang like iron when struck. They weren't exaggerating. The titanium variant reflected light differently than steel, creating an almost liquid appearance in motion. But before moving on, I would like to ask you for something. If you enjoy these deep dives into ancient military technology, please consider subscribing to support the channel. It's free and helps us bring you more fascinating content like this. One preserved fragment from a museum in Tehran reveals the incredible density of this armor. Using modern analysis, researchers counted 180 rings per square inch, triple the density of typical European mail. Each ring was flattened rather than round, creating overlapping scales that added another layer of protection. The weight advantage changed battlefield tactics entirely. Where European knights struggled under 60 pounds of armor, Persian warriors wore comprehensive protection covering arms, legs, torso, and even their horses that totaled just 25 pounds. They could fight longer, move faster, and still maintain superior defense. But there's a darker side to this innovation. The titanium deposits were controlled by a single dynasty, the Sasanian Empire. They guarded the source location so jealously that modern archaeologists still haven't definitively identified where the ore came from. Historical records mention workers at the mines having their tongues removed to prevent them from revealing the location. Even the finished armor was dangerous to possess. If enemy forces captured Persian mail, the Sasanian Empire would send assassins specifically to retrieve or destroy it. One Byzantine general wrote of finding an entire cache of captured Persian armor deliberately melted down, the metal rendered useless because the Persians couldn't risk its secret spreading. That paranoia was justified because when the Islamic conquest swept through Persia in the 7th century, they acquired not just the armor, but the knowledge, and they would transform it into something even more sophisticated. The Islamic Golden Age wasn't just about philosophy and astronomy, it was also a period of revolutionary advancements in military technology. By the 9th century, Damascus had become the epicenter of metallurgical innovation. But the breakthrough didn't come from a single discovery. It came from the merging of multiple traditions. Persian mail techniques, Indian steelmaking secrets, and original Arabian innovations came together to create something that would transform armor forever. A hybrid armor combining the flexibility of chainmail with the protection of plate. Here's what made it revolutionary. Instead of wearing chainmail under plate armor, an option that was heavy and restrictive, the blacksmiths of Damascus integrated small plates directly into the chainmail structure itself. They started with a base of extremely fine chainmail, using a 6-in-1 pattern where each ring connected to 6 others, instead of the more common 4-in-1. This created a fabric-like flexibility. Then, at strategic points, shoulders, elbows, chest, thighs, they wove in small, curved plates, no larger than a coin. But the genius was in how these plates were attached. Each plate had tiny holes around its perimeter. Mail rings passed directly through these holes, locking the plates into the mesh so they couldn't shift or separate. Under stress, force was distributed through both the rigid plates and the flexible rings simultaneously. The result? Armor that bent and flexed like pure chainmail, but provided concentrated protection where warriors needed it most, all without the weight penalty of full plate.
Contemporary illustrations from the Muhammad manuscripts show warriors wearing these hybrid suits in stunning detail. You can actually see the plates integrated into the mail, positioned to protect against upward spear thrusts and downward sword strikes, while leaving areas requiring maximum flexibility, like the lower back and inner arms, covered only by dense mail. This was armor designed for action, for the real needs of battle. Damascus smiths also introduced another innovation in plain sight. The plates themselves weren't solid metal. They were made using pattern welding techniques, layering different types of steel and forge welding them together. This created plates that were harder on the surface but more flexible in the core. When struck, the outer layer would dent but not crack, while the inner layer absorbed and distributed the impact. This is the same principle behind modern composite armor, developed independently 1,100 years later. Testing on surviving examples shows these integrated plates could withstand over 800 pounds of force before failing, equivalent to a full power strike from a two-handed sword. Yet the entire suit weighed just 35 pounds. Compare that to 60 to 70 pounds for European chainmail of the same era. This hybrid design solved one of chainmail's biggest weaknesses: blunt force trauma. Pure mail could stop a cut, but the impact would still transfer through, breaking bones underneath. The integrated plates created small zones where blunt force was deflected rather than absorbed, protecting the wearer from both cutting and crushing injuries. But creating this armor required an incredibly high level of coordination, so much so that it was nearly impossible to achieve. Each suit had to be custom fitted, requiring 3 master smiths to work in concert over 6 months to complete. One handled the mail weaving, one forged the plates, and one integrated them. Because the skills required for each step were so specialized, no single smith could master all 3 in a lifetime. This meant only the wealthiest warriors, commanders, sultans, and elite guards could afford this hybrid armor. It created a visible hierarchy on the battlefield. You could identify leadership at a glance by the shimmer of integrated plate mail, marking them both as targets and tactical priorities. But there was a looming problem. As crossbows grew more powerful, even this advanced armor began to fail. The solution would come from an unexpected direction, and from a civilization that had been quietly perfecting their own chainmail technology in isolation for centuries. By the 17th century, chainmail was beginning to fall out of favor. Firearms, particularly muskets and arquebuses, could punch through rings that had previously stopped swords for centuries. Most armies had abandoned mail altogether in favor of solid plate armor, which offered better protection against bullets. But the Ottoman Empire, caught in a constant struggle on multiple fronts, couldn't afford to outfit entire armies in expensive plate armor. So Ottoman armorers did what seemed impossible. They created chainmail that could stop bullets. The result was the triple weave technique, and it was as much about physics as it was about metallurgy. Ottoman blacksmiths realized that the problem wasn't the strength of the individual rings, it was the way force was transferred. A bullet concentrates an enormous amount of energy on a tiny point. Single-layer chainmail, no matter how strong, would simply deform inward, transferring the bullet's force and letting it pass through the gaps between the rings. Their solution was to use layers. But not just stacked layers, interwoven layers that moved independently. The outermost layer used large rings, approximately 10 millimeters in diameter, made from moderately soft iron. These were designed to deform on impact, absorbing and spreading the initial energy of a bullet strike. The middle layer used medium-sized rings, 6 millimeters in diameter, made from hardened steel. These were designed to resist deformation and catch the bullet after the first layer had slowed it down. The innermost layer used tiny rings, just 3 millimeters in diameter, woven in an incredibly dense 8-in-1 pattern, where each ring connected to 8 neighbors. This final layer was a last line of defense, designed to catch any projectile that made it through the first 2 layers and prevent it from reaching the wearer's flesh.
Here's what made this design work. Each layer was woven separately, then attached to the others at only specific junction points. This allowed the layers to slide microscopically relative to each other, distributing impact force across a wider area instead of transferring it directly through. Modern ballistics testing on recovered examples shows that this design could stop musket balls at ranges beyond 30 meters. While not reliable enough for frontline infantry, it was more than sufficient to protect cavalry and commanders, those who could afford these incredibly expensive suits. But the trade-off was severe. Triple weave mail weighed 45 to 50 pounds for a torso-only shirt, nearing the weight of full plate armor. However, it offered advantages that plate couldn't match. It could be rolled up for transport, repaired in the field with basic tools, and adjusted to fit different wearers by adding or removing rings at the edges. One captured Ottoman mail shirt, now preserved in a Vienna museum, shows evidence of having stopped 3 separate musket strikes. The outer rings are deformed, pushed inward by the impact. The middle layer shows compression, but no penetration. The inner layer is pristine. Each bullet struck with roughly 1,200 joules of energy, equivalent to being hit with a sledgehammer. But the armor held. Creating this triple leaf mail required extraordinary resources. A single suit required nearly 80,000 individual rings, each handmade, each requiring precise size and temper specifications. 3 master weavers working full-time needed 8 months to complete just one suit. At this production weight, outfitting an entire army was virtually impossible. You could barely outfit an elite unit. As the Ottoman Empire faced enemies with increasingly standardized, mass-produced firearms, the economics of triple weave mail didn't work. By the mid-18th century, its production had virtually ceased. The last known examples were created around 1760, intended for ceremonial purposes rather than battle. One of these ceremonial suits, commissioned by Sultan Mustafa III, represented the absolute pinnacle of chainmail technology. It used 4 interwoven layers instead of 3, incorporated titanium iron alloy rings in critical areas, featured integrated plates at the joints using techniques borrowed from Damascus, and employed directional weaving patterns inspired by Japanese kusari. Weighing 52 pounds, it could stop a musket ball at point-blank range. But it was obsolete the moment it was finished, made irrelevant by rifled barrels and explosive shells that no amount of woven metal could resist. That final suit stands as a monument to what medieval and early modern armor achieved, taking a simple concept, linking metal rings, and pushing it through 5 distinct evolutionary leaps over the course of 2,000 years. These innovations created protection that saved countless lives and transformed the way wars were fought. From the Celtic ingenuity that started it all, to the Ottoman Empire's final desperate push to make chainmail bulletproof, each of these innovations redefined what armor could be. These weren't just tools. They were masterpieces of pre-industrial engineering. They pushed metalworking to its absolute limits and shaped the course of history.